This is the first apostrophe use instructional video in the Conventions of Writing unit on using apostrophes appropriately with possessives. When it comes to representing possession or ownership of a singular noun here, something like a bird or a principle, you'll notice the apostrophe goes before the S when you're talking about something that is owned or used by the individual. You can even have something a little bit more abstract, not something like a concrete nest or a place to go like an office, but you can see in this example with Ross and the apostrophe S that precedes Ross's opinion. Sometimes something that is owned or possessed is abstract, like someone's responsibility or someone's opinion. Rule number 1 tends to be the most commonly understood rule when it comes to apostrophe usage or indicating possession because its application is pretty simple. Occasionally, we have some confusion when it comes to names that are a little bit more complicated than something like Ross, as we saw on the first slide. I repeated his name here so we could use it as a basis for comparison. Because if you look at something like the name Hercules, you can see that's a far more, obscure name even, but complicated in that it has more than one syllable. So I'm going to use a more common multi-syllable name like Alexis. And the key here in words that you're seeing on this screen is not just that these words have 2 or more syllables, but they also kind of end in this S sound, or they have a kind of Z sound at the end of them, a kind of Z sound. So conscience, Hercules, Schwartz, witness. You can hear that S or Z kind of sound at the end of any of those words. But with a word like Hercules or conscience, and those are singular things, just like we saw the bird or Ross on the previous slide. Adding the apostrophe S, as that initial rule would indicate, creates a kind of Z sound at the end, like Hercules' strength. So you can see how what we have the option to do, and this is something we don't often have an opportunity to choose in things, matters of mechanics, is that we have the option, and so I'm writing optional at the beginning or top of this slide, we have the option to just drop that S after the apostrophe. It says if the addition of the apostrophe S will make the noun awkward to pronounce, we have the option of dropping that S, and so you have Hercules' strength, Alexis, Alexis' course. But in names like Schwartz or witness, we don't seem to have, at least I don't when I pronounce it. Your pronunciation may be a little different, and that's why we have the option here to either keep or drop that S after the apostrophe for Ms. Schwartz's car or the witness's testimony. It would never be incorrect to put the apostrophe and the S. So if you want to make sure you're doing this accurately, you can always include that apostrophe and the S after a singular noun, regardless of its pronunciation. The next rule involves the representation of plurals with not singular nouns this time, but with possessives. With plurals. I'm underlining the S at the end of girls and players and volunteers, and even showing you how likely the last name here is Jones, and the ES makes Joneses plural. So this is more than one person whose last name is Jones in the second example. And the way to represent ownership here, because the ownership is by many players, or the possession is by many girls, is you're going to wait for the word to finish. That is, you spell the word with the S at the end, and then you use the apostrophe after the S. So these plural nouns, you can think of this as adding only the apostrophe. So no apostrophe S, we just use the apostrophe after the plural word. There are a few in the English language, however, that don't follow that natural pattern of having their plural word end in an S. I'm writing on your screen that these words are called irregular plurals. And these irregular plurals occur when we say things like men or children. And these are words that don't look like girls when we make them plural. You could see how men and children don't have that S at the end of them, nor does the word geese. Geese is a plural word for goose, but regardless, these words indicate possession or show ownership simply by putting the apostrophe before the S. We can have a plural indication of more than one child by saying children. And then if we want to show that something is owned by the children or used by the children, that's when we use the apostrophe S. This is a rule that is commonly misinterpreted or misused, and we see quite often on standardized tests. We'll practice it quite a bit. What you're seeing in rule number 3, if you kind of scan the example words in the bulleted lists, are actually words that never take apostrophes when they're indicating possessives. And that's because of their construction is by nature. They are ones that indicate possession. When I say something is mine, or it's his, or it's ours, I'm already using possessive pronouns. So there isn't any need to indicate possession with any S or apostrophe or an apostrophe and then an S. I think probably what confuses folks about these words is this particular word that I boxed in, the word its. We would use it as a possessive pronoun if we were talking about maybe a pet and we were saying, where's its leash? Or if you didn't know the gender of an animal, maybe you're at a zoo and you want to make note of the beautiful fur of the animal, and you say, well, look at the beauty of its fur. Still, these words are possessive pronouns. I could say, I'm looking for my dog's leash. My dog is male, so I could say his leash or its leash. Or if I were looking at the mane of a lion, I could say his mane or its mane. Nonetheless, these are words that indicate possession, a mane or a leash belonging to an animal. But people get this mixed up when they're using the contraction of its, and what they really mean is it is, like today, it is cold. So you just want to be mindful or intentional about the way in which you're using the word its. Either one of these is appropriate in the context in which it is used. What is never correct, though you may see it, this is never correct. We never put an apostrophe after its, just like you would never put an apostrophe after a word like his. We just don't need it because a word like its and his, or any of the ones that you see on this screen, already show possession. Okay, the final rule that we'll do in this first lesson is rules that deal with these different kinds of pronouns, not possessive pronouns, but indefinite pronouns. And it might look like there's a big list on this screen, but if you were to look a little bit more closely, you would be able to notice that these words have in common certain elements. I'm highlighting that BODY is used in words like anybody, everybody, nobody, and somebody. Often I'll call these words the body one words, because if they don't have body in them, they'll have the word one in it. Let me show you how that works. The variation of anybody would be a word like anyone, or everyone, or no one, someone. Even one on its own is a really good way to remember that if you think one is singular, all of these words are going to get represented like a singular like a singular noun would, with the apostrophe before the S. So it won't matter if you're saying each one's apostrophe S time is recorded separately, or no one's. They all are going to look the same with the apostrophe before the S. Or if he seems to need everybody apostrophe S's attention, again, if I put no one in as a substitute, it still is going to look mechanically the same with the apostrophe before the S.